いた獣のソウル目覚めて生きてきた戦いに背を向けて I'm on vision free like いつも風の吹くままにさすらう俺の明日はどっちだ
Hello and welcome to the last of this 3-part bonus episode of Melee's Turn Wheel, where I will be counting down the 10 best games that I played in the year 2023. Very excited about this one. Last episode went on for a bit longer than I was expecting, to be honest. I didn't think... it was like half trails, though, so I guess I shouldn't be that surprised. But this time, I have a lot to say about quite a number of the games I'm going to be talking about here. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think I should beat around the bush anymore, because otherwise we'll be here all day. So let's go ahead and get started with number 10, which was the Walking Dead Telltale Season 1. Telltale is a very interesting studio. If you're familiar with them, they do very story-driven games where essentially you're watching the actions play out on screen, but you do have some level of influence and control over what happens. They get a lot of flack for being very illusion of choice, more so than actual meaningful choice, quote unquote, in the sense of like you can have some control over which characters get more screen time or what kind of path your character takes, but ultimately it doesn't affect the overall course of the story. And I think a lot of people kind of go in with a bit of an expectation that it's going to be more impacted by their choices than it actually is. I think that if you go in with an understanding that it's going to be relatively, the story is going to be relatively the same no matter what, you're going to come away with a lot more positive of an experience. And I think my first ever Telltale game was Wolf Among Us, I think is what it was. And I've played a few since then, and I've honestly really liked all of them. I really like the Telltale formula. While it is true that you don't actually get to change the trajectory of the story, and sometimes that can be frustrating. Like there's the Batman Telltale game where I just wanted to... I don't want to get too into spoilers for that, but basically there was a choice I wanted to make, and the game just never gave me the opportunity, and at every opportunity I tried to do a certain thing, and it never panned out for me. So sometimes it can be frustrating when it gives you basically no meaningful choices, or no meaningful like consequences for your actions, but the choices it does give you can help feel... It does give you a lot of agency in how things play out. Like certain characters will die or live based on your actions, and that can affect later scenes. Does it change like the places you go or the things that happen there? Not really, but having, a character that would not have been there otherwise be there because of choices you made can still feel meaningful, as long as they like actually get to, contribute a little bit. And maybe this comes down to my mindset more than anything else, but I do think that Telltale games tend to have some of the most interesting moral choices to make in games for me, because ultimately that materially it's not going to affect all that much. So you can divorce yourself entirely from the concept of what choice is going to give me the best material outcome, and instead focus on what choice would my character make in this moment, or what choice is the most interesting to make in this moment, what choice do I want to make in this moment. And I think changes in the story based on your choices being meaningful is great, but if you give them too much weight, then it does get in the way of kind of like, I guess, meaningful player interaction, because at the end of the day everybody knows that they're playing a video game, right? So you're going to always want to game the system a little bit. And so by making it clear that, like, yeah, your choices matter, but not as much as you maybe expect them to, which will be pretty obvious after your first Telltale game, I think. I think that can be kind of liberating in a sense for some people and lead to more interesting decisions. Walking Dead specifically is a pretty cool IP. I'm not familiar with the show at all. I know a little bit about it, but not that much. I know it's kind of gritty. It's kind of, a lot of people die. That's kind of what I ended up expecting going into this. And that's basically what I got. There's a lot of death, and your choices can lead to certain characters dying over others. And I think what Walking Dead does well, specifically and relative to the other games, is that it also gives you another factor to consider in Clementine, because if you're not familiar, you play as, oh god, what is the guy's name? I don't remember, honestly. Lee. His name is Lee. And he meets up with a young girl named Clementine relatively early in the game, whose parents have been killed by zombies. And you basically sort of step into the role of being a father figure to her for the over the course of the game. And your choices affect not only how you act and how others perceive you, but they can also influence the decisions of Clementine as well. If you're too strict with her, she might be more rebellious. If you don't put enough trust in her, she can maybe act out a little bit more. And I think Telltale has in a Walking Dead, Telltale has a really interesting distinction of being one of the best representations of a child character in any game that I've ever played, because the risk with child characters in games or movies, whatever, is always that they're just going to be really annoying, because kids can be very annoying. I think we can all agree. But they strike this really good balance of like making Clementine feel like a kid with kid thought processes and kid problems, and making her feel like she doesn't act like a small adult, basically. Like a lot of stories will cop out that way. But also making her not super annoying. She's not that annoying. She acts realistically. She responds to what you do, and you can see the direct impact of your actions and what you say to her on her actions, which makes it a lot easier for you it makes it a lot harder for you to blame her if she does something wrong, because you can understand, like, okay, this is why she did that based on the choice that I made. Maybe I'm just saying that because I made all the right choices to have her basically, be good the whole game and not do anything too crazy. So yeah, there's that. Maybe if I made a couple more mistakes, it would feel a lot easier to blame Clementine. It would be a lot easier to call her annoying, but I like her. I think she's pretty good. Overall, Walking Dead Telltale, not one of the best Telltale games, especially from a gameplay perspective. There is gameplay in these games. And I think this was like either their first game or like their first major game or something like that. The gameplay is a little rough around the edges, for sure. You can tell. It gets a lot better in later Telltale games. I assume it gets a lot better even in later Walking Dead Telltale games, of which there are, I think, 2 more that I plan to play at some point. I don't know exactly when, but we'll see. This is funny because I'm recording this just after finding out that The Wolf Among Us 2 may be canceled. It's based on like studio layoffs happening, and it's not looking good right now for that game, which is a shame because I love the original so much, and I'd be so excited to see a sequel come out. But I'm starting to think that it's not going to happen, guys. I don't know. Hopefully I'm wrong. Okay. Yeah, I think that's all. So moving on, number 9. Ooh, this is a cool one. All right, so I mentioned last episode that I got a bundle of games from itch.io, and in that bundle of games, I talked about A Short Hike, which is the game that I brought it up for, but also in that bundle of games was Celeste. Celeste is a 2D platformer, which is considered to be one of the best 2D platformers in general. I mean, it's an indie game, and it came out. Oh, what year did it come out? Hold on, because it's a relatively old game now. It's going on. Wow, really? Hold on. It only came out in 2018. I was thinking it was closer to like 2015 or something like that, but no, 2018. Okay, that's interesting. All right. Well, scratch what I said then. But I mean, it's that's still it's coming up on its 6th birthday at the end of this month, so still a fair few years old. And I think the general consensus from what I can tell is that it's a great. I mean, first of all, it's a great game. Like, there's no getting around that. It's a really tight 2D platformer. It's challenging while still feeling fair. At least So I'm not good at platformers. I did not do the B or C sides of any of the levels because I am not built like that. I just can't. I can't do that. I'm not good at platformers enough to pull that off. But I did play the A side, and I died a fair few times, but it was still really fun, and I still had a great time. Despite the fact that some of the moments did start to get a little bit frustrating towards like the end and the middle. But overall, really fun, really challenging, but really fair ultimately. But I think what sets this game apart is the story. This is considered to be one of the best stories in a platformer. I will briefly address this. I don't want to get too into it because it's not really something that I'm comfortable speaking on. But there is a lot of LGBT subtext in this, and I think the creators have gone on record saying that Celeste, is that her actually? No, Madeline is her name. Like Celeste. No, Madeline Celeste is trans. So I think this is I think a lot of the themes and ideas presented in this game resonate really strongly with members of the LGBTQ community, because there's a lot of stuff in there about self-acceptance, about struggling with your inner demons, and about, like mental health, which, I mean, LGBTQ community is disproportionately affected by things like depression and things like that. So from that perspective, you can definitely see where that comes from. But then, obviously, I hope this goes without saying, you don't need to be, gay or trans or anything like that to, for the messages in the story to resonate with you. It's just a beautiful game, like you like the way it communicates these ideas visually, and Madeline, struggling against her kind of her shadow self or whatever. I don't know how I would describe, sort of dark, evil Madeline. But the way that she comes to terms with that over the course of the story is so good. And the music, oh my god, such a good soundtrack on this one. And it's not that long either. I don't know how many hours I have in. I don't have it on Steam, so I can't check. But it didn't feel like that long, especially if you're just doing the A-sides. Like, this is a really a tight, fun gameplay experience that the story and atmosphere just are out of this world good. Absolutely fantastic. The fact that this didn't crack my top 5 of the year really, I think, goes to show how it barely cracked my top 10 of the year. Really goes to show how many great games I played this year, because I think in most other years, including probably last year, this would absolutely have been in my top 5. But yeah, great game. Highly recommend it. I might go back for another playthrough at some point. I mentioned that I might go back for a second playthrough, and someone said just start taking estrogen at that point, bro. Which I think is funny, And again, it kind of goes to what's the word? Kind of goes to show that connection with sort of LGBTQ acceptance and things like that this game is kind of known for. Yeah, fantastic. Absolutely had a blast with it. Cannot recommend enough. All right. Next up, another phenomenal game. Holy shit. I played so many good games this year, guys. Spider-Man. Not Spider-Man 2. I don't own a PS5, unfortunately. I kind of want one. I kind of don't want one. I don't really need to spend that much money right now. And there aren't that many games that I would buy on it even. So I'm not really in a hurry to buy one. But no, I played the first Spider-Man PlayStation 4 game, like the first in the currently ongoing series of Spider-Man games. And yeah, so that one was for PS4. Great game, obviously. I think I do remember. I think this one did come out in 2018 or 20. No, it was just 2017. Wait, 2018? This was 2018. Okay, whatever. I'm wrong with all my dates apparently. So I grew up with Spider-Man 2 for the PlayStation and GameCube. And for a very long time, that was considered the gold standard of Spider-Man games. And it was really interesting because it was clearly such a winning formula. They knocked it out of the park so thoroughly on that attempt. But obviously, it was an old game. There was a lot of room for improvement. There's a lot of things that they could have done. But for whatever reason, they just dropped the concept and did not do anything like in that same style for years. But eventually they brought it back. They brought it back in 2018. Spider-Man PS4 captures that same feeling of being Spider-Man. It really makes you feel like Spider-Man. All right, we did it. I got it out of the way. I got it out of my system. It really makes you feel like Spider-Man. Playing as Spider-Man around Sandbox, New York City is just like you can't beat that idea. You know, like who doesn't think that that's a good time? You know, and it's debatable, like, how much is there to do, and like the content in the world. I always felt like the content was pretty dense, and like I always felt like I was doing something. I didn't 100% the game. I didn't get all like the suits and gadgets and all that stuff, but I did everything on the map. I did like all the landmarks basically. And I had a great time. It started to feel like it was getting repetitive a little bit towards the end, especially some of like the street fighting encounters started to get a little crazy, especially with how kind of fucking hard they got towards the end there. But otherwise, you know, I had a really good time. I mean, yeah, I don't know, guys. Do I really need to explain this one that much? I like Spider-Man. Spider-Man is my favorite superhero. I like swinging around on buildings and beating the shit out of bad guys and being everyone's friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And it's just a cool concept. And I'm really glad that they brought it back. It seems like this is the style that they're going with moving forward. They have Miles Morales, which I need to get to at some point. That is on PS4, so I could play that. Or, you know, eventually I'll get around to just playing Spider-Man 2, you know, the PS5 one. So we'll see where it goes from here. I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to get to those games. All right. So this actually was in my top 5 until recently. I only just recently got knocked out by a couple of games that I really liked that I played back to back. But it's The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. So again, this is kind of like Spider-Man in the sense of like I don't think I really need to explain this one that thoroughly. It's Zelda. It's Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. Everybody kind of knows what this game's deal is. Breath of the Wild is one of my favorite games of all time, and in a lot of ways, this is basically just a straight upgrade. I would actually say that I had more fun with Breath of the Wild overall, but that's not really because Breath of the Wild is better per se. Like if I could only pick one to ever go back to, I would absolutely pick Tears of the Kingdom. But Breath of the Wild captured that childlike wonder and made exploring Hyrule feel so fun and adventurous, and I just didn't get that same spark in Tears of the Kingdom, and that seems like the experience that a lot of people had. I do think there are some legitimate like steps down or steps back from Tears of the Kingdom in regards to in comparison to Breath of the Wild. Like I think the biggest one for me is the fact that there aren't Guardians anymore. Guardians were one of the best parts of Breath of the Wild. It always felt like such a terrifying nightmare scenario whenever you encountered one, and then when you eventually got the Master Sword or just like got better at fighting them, that you could turn the tables on them, and it felt really satisfying. There was nothing like that in Tears of the Kingdom for me. You know, like everything was just kind of like there were no Guardians that felt like Guardian type enemies that felt super satisfying to take down after a while. I also didn't even do all the game's content. Not only did I not do all the shrines, I didn't even do all the dungeons. Actually, I skipped the last one, the Spirit Temple, I think it is. I just didn't do that one because by the time I beat the 4 main dungeons, I was like, okay, yeah, I think I'm kind of done with this game. So I just went and fought Ganon and beat the game. So you could say that maybe I didn't really finish the game, but fuck you. Anyway, Tears of the Kingdom, really fun. I enjoyed stomping around Hyrule again. Again, not as much as in Breath of the Wild, but the extra layers on top, you know, with obviously the Ultra Hand system is like crazy. I didn't fuck around with it too much. I didn't find it that engaging, but it was pretty fun. I had a good time with it for what it was worth. And then, you know, the depths and the sky were both pretty mid, but the little bit of time I spent there was interesting and engaging enough, so it wasn't too bad. Overall, if you've played Breath of the Wild, you'll probably like this. Again, if you don't go in expecting it to capture that same feeling, because I know it didn't for me. I don't know if any game will ever capture that same feeling again, to be honest, because Breath of the Wild was like such a triumph of its time. I'm starting to feel like this is more about Breath of the Wild than it is about Tears of the Kingdom, but they are very similar. They're kind of, you could talk about them in the same breath, really. They're nearly identical in the broad strokes, at least. Overall, good game. Obviously, it's one of the best that I played this year. I feel like I have more negative things to say about it than positive, but that's just because its positive things are so self-evident, right? I mean, it's a huge open world game with a lot of stuff to do and explore, and if you like open world games with fun exploration, you're gonna like this. That's pretty much all there is to it, and I do. I love that shit. So, great game. Okay, I promised it. I did talk about it. I did say that I'd be talking about it. And honestly, I was a little bit surprised. No, honestly, no, I don't know why I was about to say that. I wasn't surprised at all. Next up is Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes. I talked a little bit about this in actually a pretty recent main episode. I only just recently played this. It's really simple, actually. I really like Three Houses. I really like Musou games. Boom. Like, it's done. It's tailor-made to be one of my favorite games of all time. And the fact that it didn't crack my top 5 this year really goes to show how many excellent games I played this year, honestly. But it was it was a great time. I don't think I'm going to spend too much time talking about this, just because I already did spend, again, relatively recently also, I talked about it in a main episode. It's just a lot of fun, the Musou gameplay formula is super fun. I love mowing down waves upon waves of enemies. Its story definitely still feels rushed and unfinished in places. I did also, I found out that they didn't want to have any of the endings be too good, because they didn't want to give the impression that having Byleth not be with the protagonists made their lives better, or something like that. I don't remember the exact quote, but essentially, none of the routes are allowed to have like quite satisfying conclusions where too much is accomplished, because then it would make it seem like, it would be better if Byleth wasn't there, basically, which is such I fucking hate that, man. I hate, they've gotten away from making the games too Avatar centric, I think. I'm pretty sure at this point the avatars are just essentially their own characters that you can choose the gender and name of. That's really the only thing at this point. But it's starting to feel very centralized in the same way that like the Trails of Cold Steel games are very centralized around Reen, where it's like Reen is the coolest guy of all time and can do no wrong because he is that guy. And that's the same kind of energy, I don't like that. Really introduces some really interesting ideas. I cannot get over this. This is actually like pretty major spoilers for the game, so skip over this if you care about spoilers for this game. Like, definitely, please skip over this. It's like actually a legitimate spoiler. The fact that they introduce a character, Arval, I think is his name, Arval, who is meant to serve as basically like an explanation. He's supposed to be, give some kind of background or information on those who slither in the dark, who get basically nothing like that in Three Houses, which is one of the biggest flaws with Three Houses, in my opinion, is how it handles those who slither in the dark. Arval could have been, and was honestly very much set up to be, the solution to that. Introduce this guy who has more answers and history about those who slither in the dark, so they can actually feel like an interesting, well fleshed out part of the world, and then they just don't do it. They just don't do it. He's not given any kind of they barely give him anything in terms of that kind of content. It's crazy. How do you not do that? That must have been at that point, just take Arval out of the game. That must have been like a relatively end of development decision. Maybe they were too ambitious and couldn't get to everything, kind of like Three Houses. But I feel like if that was a decision made early on in development, they just would have scrapped Arval. Like, it's just not worth it at that point. What's the point? What's he there for? But That's my only real major criticism of the story. I actually think it's really nice. Again, spoilers. Honestly think it's really nice that Geralt doesn't die. I was expecting him to bite it. I think he does die if you if you get like the bad ending on the routes. If you try to kill Byleth, Geralt jumps in and saves them or something like that. So he can die. But if you get like the proper good endings for whatever route you're on, I've only done Golden Wildfire, which is Claude's route. If you get the good ending for whatever route you're on, he just lives to the end of the game, which is such a nice change of pace for Fire Emblem parents. It's like, damn, I kind of wish that happened more often, but especially considering how dirty he got done and how forced that fucking death is in Three Houses. It was a nice change of pace. I appreciated it. Yeah, that's all I really have to say about Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes. If you like Three Houses, even if you don't like Three Houses, I know plenty of people who don't like Three Houses and still think this game is pretty good. So give it a try. I would highly recommend it. I don't think it is anymore, but it was on sale for like $15, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll buy that. It's pretty good. Pretty good deal. It was like on Amazon or something. It was off for $15. So if you can get a steal that good, absolutely go for it. All right, we have now officially entered the top 5. How are we doing on time? We're at 30 minutes. Okay, that's not too bad. And I know a good chunk of that is going to get cut out too. So, top 5. Let's go ahead and get started with that. Number 5 is To the Moon, which is another game that I played relatively recently. Actually, I don't think so. I think that was like end of FE6, beginning of FE7 that I was playing that. So that was like 4 months ago now, something like that. I don't know. Anyway, To the Moon is a story about a guy who is dying, and he calls some scientists who have the technology to go into his mind and implant memories of a better life than he actually had. So he says, I guess the pitch for this is you can have it so that they make your dreams come true, or something to that effect. They can give you the life that you never had, and you remember that on your deathbed as you die. And he says, I want to go to the moon. So they have to go into his memories, figure out what's going on, go back into his life and figure out what they have to do in order to get this guy to the moon. And the story that they uncover, the love story between this guy and his wife, is so beautiful and so awesome in so many ways. This has got to be one of my favorite love stories in a game, honestly. And a lot of games don't have not that many games have good, genuinely excellent love stories, but this is one of them. I think one of the best things about it is that you see it in reverse, because you're going through his memories from most recent to oldest. So you're seeing them as an old married couple, and then you're seeing them as newlyweds, and then you're seeing them dating for the first time. Going back through his memories, and seeing how that relationship developed, but in reverse, is super interesting. And I mean, yeah, that's basically it. It's not technically a visual novel, but it might as well be. There's some gameplay. It's not really I barely even remember it, to be honest. It's effectively a visual novel. So go in if you're looking for an interesting story, a good love story. And I did mention in when I talked about this in the main episodes. I mentioned that the choice that these guys have to make at the end, to effectively, I guess this is a spoiler again, so skip ahead if you want to avoid it. This one's not that big of a spoiler though. Eventually they have to make a decision between they can get this guy to the moon, but to do so will put his relationship with this woman in jeopardy, and they don't know whether it will recover or not. So it's would he have wanted you to do that? Would his dream of going to the moon be worth taking away the memories potentially of his relationship with this woman? And that's kind of the moral dilemma at the climax of the game. And the way they resolve that is honestly really interesting. So highly recommend. Not that expensive. Sequels exist, and I'm very excited to play them. I want to see what else this developer has cooked up. And we'll, I'll see. I'll let you know if I play any good ones. Okay. Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. Okay, so this one's funny. I played Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door the majority of it, the vast majority of it, several years ago. I don't remember exactly when. I'm pretty sure I was in college still, so that would have been, sometime between 2016 and 2020. I think it was in like 2018 or 2019. It was quite some time ago. And I played a lot of it. I played right up until the basically I got 6 out of the 7 crystal stars, I think is what they're called. And then it's one of those things I think a lot of people can relate. We're like, oh man, that was a good play session. I'm gonna put it down. I might take a break for a little bit, but I can't wait to come back to this game. And I just didn't. I dropped it for years, for no real reason. Like, I was having fun. It was just one of those things where like I put it down and I just never got around to polishing it off. But I said, no, I'm going to do it. You might think it's because of the remake announcement, because there's a remake of this game that got announced recently, but it actually wasn't. And in fact, in the time, I think it was like literally like a week, in the time between deciding I am going to finish this game and actually finishing it, that is when the remake got announced. So take that as you will. Like I'm a prophet, I guess. I could feel it coming down the pipe. I'm not sure if I'm gonna play the remake. I might. I mean, obviously, it's a great game. It's my 4th favorite game that I played this year. So I don't know if I'm gonna play the remake because I like this game quite a bit. But also, I played it once. I don't know if I'm really gonna want to play it again. We'll have to see. I wish I could say more about it. Honestly, the majority, so much of my time with it was spent so many years ago that there's a lot of it that I don't remember. I mean, it's Paper Mario, right? If you know anything about Paper Mario, especially the older Paper Mario games, it's cute, it's charming, it's funny, the humor is unmatched, the gameplay is fantastic, the worlds and environments feel so colorful and vibrant, the villains are amazing, it's just a great game, like there's really honestly nothing to complain about. I have no problems with this game, no flaws. There's probably a couple flaws. I think some of the combat towards the end of the game got a little excessive, in terms of like the ways enemies had to just like hit you, and initiate combat even if you really didn't want to. That could be a little bit frustrating, but otherwise, honestly, this is a borderline perfect game in a lot of ways, more so than maybe even some of the ones I'm going to talk about. So you really can't go wrong with this one. This is my first Paper Mario game that I've beaten, and I'm very excited to play the first Paper Mario game and also Super Paper Mario. I'm looking forward to playing all 3 of those, because I have played Super Paper Mario a good amount, and I quite liked it. So I think I'm going to be in the camp of liking it rather than the camp of not liking it, as so many people are. Yes, good game. Maybe wait for the remake. But honestly, the GameCube version holds up really well. So I don't even know if you have to wait for the remake. But if you want to, that option is there. All right, number 3. So this one requires a little bit of a run-up, a little bit of context, if you will. I have a friend who really, really likes mecha anime, like the Gundams, the Getter-Robos, the Mazingers, the Darling in the Franxx. He's gonna kill me if he hears me say that because he fucking hates Darling in the Franxx. But he really likes mech anime, and he's into this game series called Super Robot Wars. Now, I am not that into mech series. It's not that I don't like mech anime. It's just that I haven't seen a lot of it. In fact, the couple of series that I have watched, I honestly liked quite a lot. Going into this game, I had seen Code Geass, and I had seen SSSS Gridman and Dynazenon, both of which I loved. I thought, I guess all 3 of those I loved. They were fantastic. I liked them quite a bit. Code Geass in particular might be my favorite anime. Like, I've seen it a bunch of times. I love it. It's so good, despite its several flaws. But overall, I like mech anime basically. I just haven't seen a lot of it. So he said like, oh, you should check out. You should check out the series. I'm like, I don't think I'd like it. I don't know any of the characters in it. Super Robot Wars is a big crossover series where, that's not entirely true because some of the games have primarily, or maybe even entirely, original characters rather than crossovers from mech anime. But several of them have a mix of original characters and, licensed characters, like Koji Kabuto from Mazinger and Ryoma from Getter-Robo, things like that. So I said, I'm not really that interested. But then he and I struck a deal. I said, if you play the first Trails game, I will play any Super Robot Wars game of your choosing. And he said, okay, check out this one. It's called Super Robot Wars 30, and it has Code Geass and Gridman in it. So you'll know several of the characters, and I think you'll have a good time with it. I said, okay. So I started playing it. Now you might think, Super Robot Wars 30, wow, 30 is a lot of games. This must be a really long series. And you're right, it is a long series. However, it does not have 30 games in it. That's ridiculous. This game series is not 30 games long. 30 is just meant, it's called Super Robot Wars 30 because it is the 30th anniversary game. In reality, there are 64 Super Robot Wars games, and yes, you are doing that math correctly. That means that they average more than 2 games a year. It is insane. And you want to know what the craziest part about that is? Is that Super Robot Wars 30 is really fucking good, guys. Like, holy shit. I was not expecting to like it as much as I did. I went in, I knew I was going to know the Code Geass characters. I knew I was going to know the Gridman characters. There's no Dynazenon, because Dynazenon, I think, was still airing or something like that. There was some reason why Dynazenon characters weren't in this game. I think it was still kind of new, something like that. And I was expecting to like those guys, and I did. I enjoyed using all of them. But it also got me so interested in checking out these other mech series, because the characters from, like, Getter-Robo in particular, I keep mentioning that. Ryoma from Getter-Robo is so fucking cool, guys. I've never seen anything related to Getter-Robo in my entire life. But this game made me interested in watching Getter-Robo. It made me interested in watching so many Magical Knight Rayearth is in this game, and I want to watch that now. I want to watch every Gundam show now. I kind of already wanted to do that, but now I want to watch every Gundam show. Mazinger, I'm super interested in Mazinger now, whereas I'd never even heard of Mazinger before. I didn't even use any of the characters from Gunsword, but I really want to watch Gunsword now, because when the characters are forced to show up in certain maps and cutscenes, they're like super cool and interesting, and I want to watch Gunsword now. Like, holy shit. This game got me interested in mech anime. I don't know how many of those I'm actually going to watch, but I am legitimately interested. And you know what? I'm also interested in playing more games from this series, which is crazy. I honestly did not expect to like this game half as much as I did. It's like, the vibes are immaculate, and like, you can tell the amount of love and passion and detail put into this game is unbelievable. Every boss has like dialogue with like most of the units in the game, it feels like. There are like a bunch of DLC characters that all have like unique dialogue with a lot of the bosses. There's like a selection of music from each show or each IP. And you can like, every time a mech goes to fight, it plays a song from that IP. You can go into the menu and you can change it to like a different song from that same IP, or any other IP, or a Super Robot Wars original song. So I could have a Code Geass character fighting with Mazinger music in the background, or I could have a Gridman character fighting with Getter-Robo music in the background. You know what else, though? That's not even the end of it. You can import your own music to the game, and it's so easy. It's literally just a folder that you drop the MP3 files in, and you can use that music instead. The Code Geass music selection in this game sucks. So instead, I took a couple of songs from the Code Geass OST and put them in the folder, and I had Colin and Suzaku using those songs for their fights, and oh god, it was so good. Like, the amount of love put into this game is so evident. And you want to know what's crazy, guys? You want to know the craziest thing about this is that supposedly this is like not even considered to be one of the best Super Robot Wars games by fans of the series. I don't know how accurate that is. I liked it quite a bit. If there's games that are better than this, then I would like to see them personally. But, you know, I feel like, I mean, I don't know what else to say. Like, if you have even a passing interest in mech series, you should play this. I will say, caveat, it spoils a lot of like, if you care a lot about spoilers and you're interested in watching the shows that are represented in this game, do not play this game because it does spoil a lot of things. Not everything, and it keeps a lot of things vague, and you probably don't really know what they're talking about most of the time. So it's probably fine, but you know, still worth keeping in mind. Don't even get me started on like the story and the original characters in this game are fucking fantastic. Edge St. Klaus is one of my favorite video game protagonists ever. He's just so funny and so genuine, and like his dialogue is so good. His theme song fucking rules. Oh my god, this game is so good, guys. Like I cannot stress this enough. Even if you don't care about mech anime, this is worth looking into. It's expensive, especially if you want all the DLC. But like honestly, especially if you can get it on sale, it's worth it. I swear to God, guys. Like, I'm not kidding. This is such a good game. There's so much content. My only criticism with the game is that it is too long. And that's not in a... This game has, like, a lot of, like, padding and dragged out content. There is some padding and dragged out content. But, like, most of the content... In fact, I would say all of the content that I played was good and meaningful and fun. But there's just... so much of it. It's such a long game. There's so much stuff in there, and fuck, man, I really like this game. I'm looking at my WAV file or my audio on Audacity, and I'm just fucking peaking like crazy. That's very funny. Fuck, man, I just really like this fucking game. Please play it. I'm begging you. Okay. I think that's enough for gushing from me. Yeah, Super Robot Wars 30. Play it. It's available on Steam. One of the only Super Robot Wars games to have an official localization and is playable and purchasable in America. Or the West in general. So yeah, give it a shot. All right. Closing in on the end here, guys. Number 2. This game actually came very close to being my number 1. I did think about it for a little bit, but I ended up settling on number 2. And that game is Yakuza 0. This is my first experience with the Yakuza series. I've seen clips, I've seen memes, and for the longest time, I've kind of had this game on my backlog thinking, I need to play this at some point. I know I'm going to fuck with it because it seems right up my alley. But I just never got around to it. This year, I decided to make it a priority, and good God, was I ever correct. This game is so up my alley. It is genuinely compelling. The characters are excellent. The gameplay is really fun. The extras and side modes are fantastic. And guys, it is so goddamn funny. It is one of the funniest games I have ever played. I'll start with that, because this is you know, I really like talking about this. Yakuza 0, and I'm assuming the Yakuza series in general, although I've only played the one. Yakuza 0 is very funny because it has a very similar tone to not one of my favorite anime, my favorite anime of all time, which is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is really funny. And I think one of the funniest things about it, probably the single funniest thing for me, is that it is a very silly show. It is a very goofy, wacky, fun show. And it knows that. It knows how ridiculous and over the top it is. But it treats itself super seriously. So you're seeing all this craziness happening through the lens of a show that is taking itself completely seriously, and like it's so funny. Like the juxtaposition between what's actually happening and like the tone of the writing is really funny, and that's where the comedy comes from in JoJo's, and it's also where the comedy comes from in Yakuza. Kiryu Kazuma is, I said Edge St. Klaus from Super Robot Wars 30 is one of my favorite game protagonists. Kiryu Kazuma is I think, gun to my head, might be my favorite protagonist from any video game. Like, he is so funny. He's so genuinely nice. He's just, like, such a good guy. And, like, he, like, the wacky side adventures that you can have him do are just like so fun, you know? Like, he's this guy in the Yakuza, and he takes himself super seriously, but he's also, like, you know, you go and you have him, like, talk to a guy who's like, oh man, I need a producer for my movie, and Kiryu doesn't know shit about being a movie producer, but he's like, yeah, whatever, I'm game, sure, why not? Or he, like, helps film a music video, or he gets really into model car racing. You know, like, it's just this funny shit. Like, he's a very layered protagonist with, like, interests and hobbies outside of what is shown to us in the main story, and I think that that's a mark of any good character, especially a protagonist, though. And I think it's a type of protagonist that games are very equipped to handle and execute on, but they almost never do, unfortunately. It's quite a shame. Yeah, I mean, I felt like I would have more to say about it, but, like, the gameplay, it's like a beat 'em up game with, like, a bunch of different styles. I haven't even talked about Majima, who is the other protagonist in Zero. And he is a lot of fun. I think I like Kiryu a little bit more, just as a character, but in terms of the gameplay, Majima is so much fun. And just kicked ass. His fighting styles were all super fun and unique. And I had a great time with him the whole game. The story was ridiculous and silly, and the conflict was more than a little contrived at some points, but I didn't care. I was having a great time with it regardless, you know, and it felt so consistently entertaining throughout. I didn't engage in all the side modes. I didn't do all the mini games. I didn't do the real estate stuff, like, at all, and I barely did any of the club stuff that on Majima's side. But from, like, the mini games that I did play, like, I think, like, the car mini game was not good because it was so, like, solved, you know, like, you just have to get the best parts and then you win, and if you don't have the best parts, then you just lose. But it was just very entertaining from a like a story perspective and from, like, a tone perspective that I really liked it. The karaoke, oh my god, the karaoke is so good. It's got to be one of my favorite side modes in any game ever. Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing, and I don't really have much else to say about it. I think I've kind of said my piece on it. Play this game. It is a great entry point for the Yakuza series. It is a prequel game, so it does have that problem that a lot of prequels have, where like stuff happens in earlier games, and then it doesn't always line up perfectly with what happens in the prequel. Like, you know, like certain older games, you know, if you play them after, might not make sense coming off of this one, or it's not that they don't make sense. There might be some, like, questionable things that you might raise an eyebrow for, but otherwise, really good entry point, and the one that I would recommend, because, I mean, I liked it, so it's probably pretty good. I mean, the other obvious one would be, like, Yakuza 1, but apparently Yakuza 1 is, like, terrible. Or Yakuza Kiwami, I think is what it's called. Yeah. Who knows? Give it a shot. Alright, guys. We did it. We made it. It's here. Best game that I played this year is actually a game that I played the majority of in 2022. I'm pretty sure I beat this game in, like early January 2023. But it still counts because I didn't include it on last year's list because I hadn't beaten it yet. So, you know, it gets to count here, goddammit. So it is with a heavy heart that I must say, let's do this one last time. The Legend of Heroes Trails to Azure is the best game that I played this year. That's it. Have a good rest of your night, guys. No. Okay, so Trails to Azure is the second of the Crossbell duology. It is two Trails games. Trails from Zero, which came in number 2 last year, and Trails to Azure take place in Crossbell, follow police detective Lloyd Bannings and his group called the Special Support Section, and the protagonists alongside of him. And you're solving mysteries, you're solving crimes, and you're just having a good time. Like the geopolitics of Crossbell is really interesting. Crossbell itself is just such an interesting place to like go and explore. The character arcs in this game are immaculate. It's not perfect. That's what I'll say. This game is certainly not perfect, and I think in particular, it introduces one of the biggest problems that I have with the series, more so than Cold Steel 1 did, which is that the villains in this game were very kind of not great. I do like several of the villains in this game, but there are way too many of them. Several of them feel rushed and forced and don't really get to do anything. And I think that was really when they started. This game is when they started to go off the rails with the villains. There was also a lot of plot twists in this game, because this game kind of like wraps up the whole Crossbell saga. And there's a lot of like plot reveals that happen in this game that are not very well foreshadowed, and the execution is questionable. I still like several of them, to be quite honest, but I do think that there's room to argue that they were not executed on perfectly. Overall, it's a fucking phenomenal game. It's actually not my favorite Trails game. My favorite Trails game is still Trails from Zero, which is the one that came before this one. But this game is kind of like neck and neck with Trails in the Sky second chapter for being my second favorite game in the series. Overall, like that whole like top 3 Trails games are just like some of the best games that I've ever played. I mean, like it may not come across, but like Trails from Zero is in my top 10 favorite games of all time, which is funny because it was only the second favorite game that I played last year, but that's because Persona 4 Golden, which won last year, is also in my top 10 favorite games of all time. I played 2 of my top 10 favorite games last year, which is quite funny. So it might seem like Trails to Azure is falling a little bit short in comparison to that, but that's just a very high standard to live up to, And overall, it's a great game with so many good elements. The character arcs are, for characters like Randy and Wazy and Noelle and several of the. I wish I could say Tio and Ellie too. But unfortunately, they kind of get the short end of the stick, especially Ellie doesn't really get a lot to do in this game, which is unfortunate. I've kind of gone on at length at this point on the various things that I love about the Trail series, and honestly, I'm not opposed to, now that I've played all the games that are currently out in the US, just doing like a full like 3-hour long episode about the entire series. I'm probably not going to do that, but I would like to at some point. It could be fun. So basically what I'm trying to say here is I'm not going to ramble on about this too much. You've already heard my takes on Trails, and I don't want to, the episode is already approaching an hour. I don't want to have it take too much longer. Just suffice it to say, Trails to Azure is easily the best game that I played this year. Yakuza 0 came close, but it did not dethrone this for me. I love Trails with all my heart. It is the only game series, as I mentioned, that comes close to taking Fire Emblem's spot as my favorite game series. I think if Trails of Cold Steel 2, 3, and 4 were a little bit better, I think that it would probably be my favorite game series. But yeah, I know I talked about it a lot. Thank you for bearing with me. I went through the entire back half of the series in 1 year. Next year, we're getting the next game in the series, Trails Through Daybreak, I think is what it's called. So you will have to hear me talk about it again next year, I'm sure. Whether I do like every game I played in 2024 or just like a top 10 or whatever, it's probably going to be in there. But we shall see. I'm not 100% sure what to expect with that one, but yeah. Overall, really good year for games for me. Like I said, playing 30 games and only a handful of them being like mediocre to bad is like a really good track record. And like as soon as we hit the top 12 or 10, like just banger after banger after banger, I would sincerely recommend like wholeheartedly every game that I mentioned in my top 10 at the very least in this episode. Going back an episode, maybe a little bit more hit or miss, and then probably just skip all the ones that I mentioned in the first episode, to be honest, if you want to. thank you guys. If you managed to sit through all 3 of these fucking episodes, God bless you. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And I'll see you all in the next main episode of FE7. Bye-bye.